hello, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. And this is really important because I hear parents all the time saying, I wish I had a manual for my kid. And we sort of do. And it's called emotions. And that's why emotion regulation is so important. We just need to understand them. So, we're talking about the function of emotions. We're going to be looking at this for the next few weeks. Um, because really emotions are messages that they tell us what we need. And I know I've talked about it before, but I really want to make sure we are differentiating between emotions and feelings because we do use those terms interchangeably, but they're different. And so part of this is understanding that piece. Now, emotions, they're biopsychosocial responses to internal stimuli or external stimuli, things that are happening in our bodies or in our minds or out in the environment. And they really serve an adaptive function, often tied to survival. And part of survival is social connection. If we weren't part of a tribe and we didn't belong, we probably wouldn't survive very long. So, connection, survival, personal meaning, they're often connected here. Now, these emotions, they include physiological activation, like our breathing, our heart rate, our hormones, our cognitive appraisal of the situation. This is unfair, right? That perspective. Our action tendencies. So when we go into, we're activated and we might be anxious, our action tendencies might be to run away or maybe to fight or maybe to seek comfort, right? So those are our action tendencies. But then there's also our expressive behaviors. That's what we're actually showing the world through our facial expressions, through our posture. So, in essence, emotions are full body, whole system experiences that are alerting us to something important and preparing us to act. It's rapid, it's often unconscious. We don't even know that these processes are happening. They have a clear evolutionary and functional purpose, right? To protect ourselves when we're scared. Sadness signals that need for connection. I will include a little table as a reminder in the show notes, so be sure to check that all out. Now, I've talked previously about how emotions aren't random. We need them. They're meant to protect us. Now, feelings are different. Feelings are conscious. There are a subjective experience or our subjective interpretation of emotions, of what's happening, right? So it's what we become aware of internally. And they're shaped by our own personal narratives, our past memories, any associations that we've made, and even things like language and culture. You might feel sad or guilty or excited, but those feelings arrive from the emotional response pattern that started in your body and in your brain. So, for this discussion on the functional work, understanding the purpose of an emotional response and meeting the need of that emotion, we need to focus on the broader category of emotions versus feelings because they really include that physiological and action oriented component that tells us something, adaptive is being signaled here and it's serving as a core regulatory function. And so we need to understand the function of the emotion. Now, of course, feelings vocabulary is essential for self awareness and emotional literacy, but that's our subjective interpretation of what's going on. So we teach kids to label feelings as sad, proud, disappointed. We're building that literacy. We're building their metacognition, meaning their ability to think about how they think about things. However, we really anchor our support strategies in the function of the underlying emotion. So we're teaching kids skills, but the supports that we're offering is based on the function of that emotion. So we have to have a view of what's happening, of what's going on. But it's helpful for us to know what's happening in the body, for kids to know what's happening in their body. So doing some body mapping can be really helpful. But then understanding the emotion behind the feeling that we're labeling this experience with to identify the needs and to guide helpful action. So it's not just a reactive, scream, or a reactive run away, or a reactive punch, or whatever else is going on. And you can use both together by saying something like, oh, wow, it sounds like anger is shown up, right? That tells me something that something feels unfair. Maybe something feels out of my control, right? So let's figure out what you need right now. So they do need to have that emotional literacy, right? Before we can really work on this with kids, they need to be able to label their experience. And I've talked about getting really granular with how we're feeling and understanding the different interconnected parts of an emotional experience, right? How their emotions affect their thoughts, their behaviors, the physical sensations. And so we can learn to start differentiating between helpful and unhelpful responses to emotions. We don't have any control over those automatic thoughts or the automatic physiological feelings that are coming up, right? But we can change our reaction. So really quickly, we can start by taking a situation and identifying the specific feeling that came up, like anger or anxiety, the body feelings that we're experiencing during that emotional event, the impulses or strong desires to act in a certain way, like I really just want to punch you in the face, or I really want to run away or scream, the thoughts, beliefs, interpretations that are associated with that situation, and then the behaviors or actions that we actually take in response to the situation and feelings. So being able to understand all of that can be really helpful. I like organizing all of that information visually. We're connecting the different elements of how the emotional experience show up and their interrelationships, right? My thoughts fuel how I'm feeling, which fuels my behaviors, and vice versa. My behaviors fuel how I'm feeling and how I'm thinking about things. So, having that visual really helps kids see the big picture of how an emotion unfolds and how those different parts really influence each other. So, that's really important. So I teach it with a recent situation that kids have experienced that we can analyze. So, what was a specific recent event where kids experienced a strong, you know, unpleasant emotion? That's going to be easier for them to probably remember and to talk about. We want as much vividness and accuracy in remembering the situation as possible. And usually we have the best memory for those big unpleasant emotions. So maybe let's say we have a teen who recently was frustrated while they were trying to complete some homework or a school assignment or something like that. So now we can break down that experience into the key parts to map out and show how everything connects. So maybe we start with our center circle. This is the situation, right? So let's say the situation is we're trying to finish our novel study on Othello for school or something like that. Okay. Now, from there, we can start branching out. And one of the branches, there's a circle labeled thoughts. And we'd ask what thoughts went through your mind right before or during the situation when that frustration came up. Okay. And now from there, we're going to have branches from all of the thought circles with all the different thoughts. This is too hard. I'm never going to finish this. I'm so stupid. I don't understand Shakespeare. It's easier just to give up. I'd rather go play on my iPad. Everyone else gets it but me. Whatever those thoughts are, right? So we have the one branch situation, thoughts, and all those branches of all the thoughts that come up. Now we have another branch from the situation that leads to our feeling circle. So now we ask what feelings came up? What did you feel? Right? We want to get them very specific and granular. And so now from that feeling circle, we'll have lots of different branches because oftentimes one thing. So maybe there's frustration, maybe there's anxiety, about not finishing it or failing it. Maybe there's helplessness or irritation, right? So we talk about all those feelings. Now, branch three from that situation, our third branch is going to be our physical sensation circle. So we ask, what does your body feel like, right? So now they can start connecting, feeling the bodily experiences. And if they're like, I have no idea, well, what do you think, right? Or it's let's go and collect some data. The next time you go and work on something difficult, I want you to collect some data on this so that they're thinking about these three things. But we've got our physical sensation circle. So branches from there might be, tightness in our shoulders or in our chest. Maybe I've got a headache. Maybe there's restlessness. I'm fidgeting. I'm breathing differently. My stomach is, whatever the physical feelings were. Branch four, that's the circle, is our urges or impulse circle. So we can ask what strong urges, what were your impulses, right? What did you feel like doing in that moment? So now the branches from there. Maybe it's I wanted to throw the book or slam the laptop, or I wanted to yell, I wanted to walk away, I wanted to go do something fun, I wanted to avoid, right? I wanted to distract myself. Whatever those things are, they can look at what those urges and impulses are, because that's really what we're going to be targeting, isn't it? Because it's usually those urges, the reactive responses that get us into trouble. Now, branch five, that's our behaviors or action circle. What did you actually do in response, right? So maybe the branches from there is procrastination, right? Maybe they were doing things like checking their phone. Maybe they were getting a snack or playing with the dog. Maybe they did slam their laptop shut or throw their book. Maybe they made some negative self comments. Maybe they just were avoiding their parents, avoiding eye contact, especially when they asked about how it was going. Maybe they gave up completely for the night. So we want to ask, what was it that you actually did? Now, kids have this visual of all of the different parts of the emotion based on one situation. And it's great to really draw lines or arrows to show how the situation led to those thoughts, the feelings, the urges, the physical sensations, and ultimately their behaviors. We want to reinforce that these components are all influence each other in the cycle. We want them to reflect on this map to identify patterns, understand the triggers. So maybe if I slam my thing, maybe I was feeling frustrated or anxious, and then I slammed my book. But because I did that, now I'm feeling angry. And because I'm thinking that, I'm beating myself or like feeling angry. Now I'm thinking they can see the interrelationship and the reciprocal nature of these things. Now they can start exploring adaptive responses in the future. Now, if they say, no, I was able to just self talk and be like, just get through this, and then we want to really capitalize on that. How did you get there? What were the strategies that you used to be able to keep yourself going? Those are important behaviors. But then we can look at the behaviors that weren't helpful. What behaviors got you in trouble? What behaviors got you away from your goal of finishing this assignment, right? We can really start looking at all of those pieces. So this is kind of the start. We will be looking more at those adaptive responses in the future, but there's lots of important skills that we need here. First, it starts with mapping. When kids can understand this map of emotions, so to speak, that this is a key part of building their emotional awareness. And part of that awareness too is understanding the functions of feelings, why they show up, what are emotions trying to tell us through all of these experiences, and how do we turn those needs underneath all of those emotions to guide us to what we need to do to be successful moving forward, instead of getting stuck, instead of getting overwhelmed. So it can be really helpful for us to understand too why a kiddo will explode over something that we perceive to be a small deal. We adults are using different parts of our brain and we have better communication among our brain, so we can rationally say that's not a big deal. But for them, they're using different parts of the brain and they don't have the same connection. For them, it is a big deal. And so this can really start helping why that's a big deal. Why is it they shut down when they're overwhelmed, right? Or if things aren't going their way, or if they get clingy for no obvious reason. Because often we're missing the adaptive mechanism for whatever's going on for the kiddo in the moment, because we just focus on the behaviors. The behaviors is the symptom. It's not the underlying thing that's going on. So if an angry child, we assume this child is angry because they hit a peer, you know, then we reprimand that kid. But we're not understanding that that child is trying to establish boundaries. They're trying to protect their personal space. Maybe they're trying to protect the Lego thing that they just built. And we're misinterpreting that as being bad or disruptive or inappropriate, especially in settings where there's other kids, like in a classroom, for example, or with a sibling. And so now we're punishing that kid, but we're just making them feel even more threatened, even more vulnerable. Or maybe a scared child, it might come out. They're scared, but fear, we get angry, we fight. So maybe they're yelling and swearing. And when they're not getting their need met and they're just feeling even more panicky, they're running away to get that immediate relief from some perceived danger. We see it as a liability, especially in a classroom, or we're only focusing on the disruptiveness of it and the inappropriateness of it, but we're failing to address what's actually going on for them, especially if kids, their behaviors are misidentified as oppositional and defiant instead of anxious. I can go on and on and on, but this is really important for us to remember. Emotions serve a function, and behaviors are driven by emotions. They're not random. They're not just obstacles to get over. They're not something that we need to eliminate. Every emotion, whether it's joy or anger or shame, it's communicating something. They're a signal about the world around us. And it's sort of the body's way of saying, "Hey," like it's waving this little flag saying, "Hey, pay attention. Something important is happening here." From an evolutionary perspective, again, emotions helped us survive. Why would we have all these emotions if they weren't important for some evolutionary adaptation? Fear helped us escape danger. Anger helped us protect our boundaries. Sadness signaled a need for connection, for support, for time away to process the situation. Joy, it kept us coming back to the good stuff that made life worth living. There's no good or bad feeling, they're all important. But the problem is, in our modern Western quick fix autopilot, go, 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 go world, where we don't have all of these predators and things around the corner lurking to kill us, even common cold, right? We've kind of lost our emotional awareness, and this is a problem. And now we label emotions as good or bad. We try to shut down those negative feelings. We try to suppress them. We want to give them a quick fix. Maybe it's with alcohol or benzos, or we're trying to distract kids, right? Whether it's a pill or just numbing out in front of the TV. And we end up teaching kids that these emotions are bad. You got to suppress them. You shouldn't be feeling them. You got to breathe, relax, get them away. They're actually full of wisdom. If we're trying to eliminate these feelings without understanding, we are missing out on all of that wisdom, and they're just going to get worse over time. We're always telling kids it's not a big deal, you don't need to cry. Or we say it's okay to feel angry, but then we really don't help them understand why they're feeling angry or what to do when they're feeling angry, other than saying don't hit. Well, that's not helpful, right? We're not helping them understand what's actually happening inside, which is really what we need kids to do to figure out the purpose of the emotion and what's the need beneath it and how do I address that in adaptive ways. I want to make sure that I go through as many as I can. So I'm going to do a multi-part series where I'm really looking at different types of emotions, 4 different quadrants of emotions, which will make sense of emotions a little bit more once we break them into quadrants based on, one quadrant, when we're looking at the X or Y axis, it's really based on whether the emotion we consider it pleasant or unpleasant. And the other axis is high or low energy. And the reason we really want to split this up because is the more technical we can get, right? The more technical terms when we're looking at arousal and valence. There's 2 basic neurobiological processes that underline all emotional experiences and are really important for case conceptualizations for all my therapists out there, and how, if you're just working with kids or maybe they're your own kids, how we're targeting that emotion regulation. So valence refers to how pleasant or unpleasant the emotion feels. It's driven by activity in the different brain regions that evaluate, is this a reward or is it a threat, right? So it's evaluating the value of a stimuli based on reward or threat. And you probably guessed it. I mean, arousal really reflects the level of physiological activation or alertness associated with an emotion, ranging from really low, that's the calm or sluggish, to really high, excited, intense. So this is primarily modulated by the automatic nervous system and different brain structures. I'm not going to go into all the brain stuff now, but I will put a brief overview in the show notes if you're really interested, especially if you want to teach about the different parts of the brain to kids, because sometimes they're really interested in that. So we can put that there. It's really helpful to teach kids, though, how that arousal, right, how our body is reacting in terms of calmness or excitedness. And that valence, how do we perceive it? Is it pleasant? Do we like it? Is it unpleasant? We don't really like it. Because that can really help to externalize their experience. That way, it's not bad behavior or good or bad or something's wrong with you or something's wrong with your brain. We're just trying to reframe how well the nervous system is being able to regulate itself. And if it's not very regulated, well, it's trying to respond to the internal energy levels and some of the emotional meaning. So if you have a kiddo who's stuck in high energy and unpleasant quadrant, those are the kids who are angry. they're probably going to benefit from somatic regulation tools like movement. Let's use up this energy. Could even be pleasant, high energy, pleasant. That's where they get really excited and they get silly. They probably need some physical outlet to use up that energy. A teen, let's say, with low energy and unpleasant sort of emotions, quadrant, they're there. They're kind of slow. It's the depressed. I don't want to get out of bed. Well, they're going to benefit from activation strategies like behavioral activation, or maybe connection or something fun, novel, new, just to get their brain excited. So you can see how knowing where they are in these quadrants can be really helpful to tell us exactly what's needed in that moment. It's not breathing, relaxation to try to get rid of them. We need to feel them to understand what it is that we need. Now, I talked about how core affect is often very ambiguous, right? If it's okay. In previous episodes, I've talked about it, but I'm telling you now, it's ambiguous, which causes kids to misattribute body signals like tension or elevated heart rate or anxiety or danger when they might actually be excited or they might actually be hungry. We're misattributing what our internal experiences are. And that's why we really need to build that interoceptive awareness so they understand. So that can be another tool, right? That we're helping kids use to decode those internal signals. And then that's going to help them really figure out what's the label I need, right? We want them to be accurate with how they're actually feeling, and that's going to be important for regulation. So each of these quadrants really gives even more clues about what's happening inside and how we might be able to support it. So figuring that out is helpful for us and for kids to slow down, really get in tune with what's going on so they can build up this internal map of their emotional landscape. So the goal is to really help kids recognize where they are in the quadrant. We want to understand the body signals or arousal, the feeling tone, right? Pleasant or unpleasant, and accurately label that emotion just to enhance that emotional granularity. With that emotional granularity, now they can find the right regulation tool to match what's going on for them. So that process is going to help kids learn that all emotions, it doesn't matter how unpleasant they are, they're okay, and we need to have them. That's a key strategy in and of itself. Getting to that place of acceptance. Okay, you've shown up. Great. What's the signal here? Right? And then it gives them a path forward of what they might need in that moment. Now, I will be going through this in the coming weeks, and it's going to be really helpful as you're listening to draw out a quadrant map and start naming emotions and what might be going on. And with kids, week by week, you can start like we're just focusing on this quadrant. I'm actually going to start with the high energy, pleasant emotions, right? Like excitedness, for example. Now, if you don't like quadrants, that's okay. You could draw a weather map of feelings, right? Little kids might really benefit from that because we need to have all sorts of weather, don't we? We need to have rain, we need to have dryness, we need to have the winter. I mean, in Canada, there was a couple of winters where it didn't get cold enough and it didn't kill diseases and bugs in the tree. And now we've got all these trees with all of that get sick, right? We even need to have cold in certain parts of the world. We need to have it all. So, same thing with emotions. We need to have them all. And we can start to map that onto our feelings. We need sun that helps things grow. What emotions would you map onto the sun? Probably things like happiness, calm, joy, anything that restores our energy, that builds connection, makes life meaningful. If we only had sun, though, plants would dry out and die, wouldn't they? If we only had happiness, we wouldn't learn resilience. Life would probably feel pretty shallow and unrealistic. We need rain too, because rain nourishes, right? It's nourishing the soil so that everything can grow and, just everything's flourishing. So, what could go on with rain? What maps onto rain? Sadness? That's really important. It helps us process our losses. It helps us heal. It helps us connect more deeply with others. Tears are like rain, it clears out those heavy clouds. If we never had rain, growth would stop. If we never felt sadness, we wouldn't appreciate or even know joy as much as we do, right? We wouldn't know how to deal with difficult moments. We need to have a storm, because they shake things up. They clear away the weak things, the dying things, right? They make space for renewal. Anger and fear can energize us to set boundaries, to protect ourselves, to stand up for what's right. If we never had storms, we'd never learn courage. We'd never learn assertiveness. We'd never know how to repair any conflicts. But if storms stay too long, well, they can cause damage, don't they? So we need to have balance. We need to have wind. Wind moves things. It spreads the seeds. It carries change. Feelings like what could go on to wind? Curiosity, excitement, even just nervousness, that nervous energy. It pushes us to explore new things, to try new things, to grow. If we had no wind, life would stay still and stagnant. We wouldn't stretch. We wouldn't have new experiences. We wouldn't learn to be adaptable. We'd be inflexible. Fog, even. Fog, it slows us down. It makes us really pay attention. Confusion would probably be some fog, uncertainty. It invites us to pause, to reflect, so that maybe then we can find clarity. If we never had fog, well, we might rush ahead without thinking. We might miss subtle details. Fog teaches patience. Fog teaches mindfulness. So every type of weather is part of a healthy climate system, just like every emotion is part of a healthy emotional life. So our job is not to control the weather, but we need to learn how to dress for the weather and how to move through it safely, right? And how to change our behaviors so that we can still do what we need to do, regardless of what the weather is. So how can we have kids match feelings to different types of weather? And then have kids map out their own weather feelings, right? If your feelings were weather right now, what would they be? So you can look at the quadrants, which I will be talking about, but I love this idea of this weather map as well. But this is a lot. I will leave it there for today. Lots to think about. I will be getting into some of those different quadrants of emotions next time. And then from there, we'll be building on, how do we choose adaptive responses based on what the needs are and what we need here. So thank you for joining me today. If you found this helpful, share with others. Head over to Apple Podcasts to rate me so others can find the show. Hope you have a lovely day. Help those kiddos be bold and courageous, and I will see you next time.